Welcome to our webinar, Verifying Descent from Salem's Accused Witches. My name is Melanie McComb, genealogist at American Ancestors, New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be moderating today's webinar. This program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of court cases and accusations of witchcraft across colonial America. Yet the most famous series of prosecutions from this period are the Salem witch trials between 1692 and 1693. In that short period, more than 200 were accused, 30 found guilty, and 20 executed. In this online lecture, Chief Genealogist David Allen Lambert will discuss how to verify your lineage from someone accused of witchcraft in Salem during the Hysteria. He will point you to key records, resources, and references for proving your line of descent. We will have a Q&A at the end of today's presentation. At any time, please type your questions into the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. A handout is available for sale for $10 on our website. I've included a link in the chat section. Starting tomorrow, you will be able to watch a recording of today's presentation on the course page. Our speaker today is David Allen Lambert. David has been on the staff of American Ancestors NEHGS since 1993 and is the organization's chief genealogist. David is an internationally recognized speaker on the topics of genealogy and history. David has published many articles and authored or co-authored in the published genealogies presented to David McCullough, Ken Burns, Angela Lansbury, Michael and Kitty Dukakis, Nathaniel Philbrick, Doris Kearns Goodwin, and Boston Mayor Thomas Menino. He has also published 11 books, including A Guide to Massachusetts Cemeteries. David received his BA in History from Northeastern University. David is an elected fellow of the Massachusetts Historical Society in Boston, Massachusetts, and a life member of the New Hampshire Society of the Cincinnati and the General Society of the War of 1812. David also serves as a tribal genealogist for the Massachusetts tribe at Ponkapog in Massachusetts. His areas of expertise include New England and Atlantic Canadian records of the 17th through 21st century, American and international military records, DNA research, and Native American and African American genealogical research in New England. Please join me in welcoming David Allen Lambert.
Thank you very much, Melanie. There's really a lot of history to contend with when over 400 years of Massachusetts history we look at. Through the eye of the historian or the genealogist, I think the part that sends the most concern of the actions of our ancestors is the Salem witchcraft trial. I am related to one of the judges, Samuel Sewell. He is the brother of my ancestor. I am also related to people that were accusing during the trial, as well as the accused. My own 10th great grandmother, Mary Perkins Bradbury, was accused of witchcraft, jailed, sentenced to be hanged, and then escaped. She is one of the stories that sort of had a happy ending, but for so many, this is not the case. This afternoon, we're going to look into the past to discover how you may be able to verify that you have a connection, in this case, with an accused witch of Salem, Massachusetts. You'll also learn that not all of the accused came from Salem, or even for that matter, from Essex County. And you may be very surprised that a lot of the research that you can do to find their story may not be poring over original records, but it's actually sitting at your computer. So much has been digitized. This lecture is by no means to tell the story or retell the story that has been done so well by authors like Stacy Schiff, Marilyn Roach, Emerson Baker, just to name a few, but to make it personal for you, to maybe make you look a little further back in your history to find out if you do, in fact, have a connection. The overview of today's lecture will be historical background, looking a little bit before the Salem witchcraft trials. Many people actually don't believe there were any other witchcraft trials before or after 1692 in Salem. Locating your accused ancestor by observing your own genealogical work that you may have done for your family history. I'll go over an overview of resources that are available online on different websites. We'll talk about published biographies of the accused, because there's really no point of reinventing the wheel. There is some fine scholarship out there, and I'll highlight two of them that are my personal favorites and I use as a reference genealogist here at NEHGS in Boston regularly. And lastly, we'll talk about two hereditary societies you may consider joining, one for the ladies and one for the gentlemen. Starting off with historical background. Before the Salem witchcraft hysteria, and this by no means is exhaustive, but to sort of give you a touching on the overview of how this hysteria of witchcraft has been in the forefront of European, before it even became something in North America. We have between 1550 and 1650, for over a century, thousands of convicted witches were burned to death in Germany. In 1577 in Toulouse, France, 40 convicted witches were burned to death. In 1645, 18 were convicted of witchcraft and hanged, almost similar to the amount that occurred during the Salem hysteria. In 1647 in Connecticut, Alice Young is the first New Englander executed for the crime of witchcraft. So this is the first accused and executed for the crime. In 1648, Margaret Jones is the first resident of Massachusetts executed for the crime of witchcraft, nearly 50 years before the witchcraft trials, and just shy of the amount of time. Just one tip that I do want to mention, especially those new to examining the Salem witchcraft trials: the accused witches were not burned at Salem. They were hanged. And also the unfortunate gentleman who was pressed to death under heavy weight. And besides those who died in prison awaiting trial for malnutrition, maltreatment, etc. So before 1692, we also have witchcraft trial executed right around here in the city of Boston. Ann Hibbins, who my colleague D. Brenton Simons is part of his book Witches, Rakes, and Rogues discusses. We also have 1656 to 1680, the case of Eunice Cole from New Hampshire. And the span of years is not her life, but the span of how many different accusations came forth. But Eunice Cole, when she died in 1680, didn't die in the gallows. She died at home. She was never found guilty. Elizabeth Morse and Mary Hale, Elizabeth Morse from Newbury, Massachusetts, were two individuals that were accused of witchcraft a little over a decade before the Salem hysteria. And then we think of the afflicted girls and others that pointed the finger during the Salem witchcraft trials. We think of people like Ann Putnam. The Goodwin children in 1688 were accusatory towards people for the crime conviction of witchcraft in 1688. In Massachusetts, between 1692 and 93, there are a total of 160 to 200 at least accused for witchcraft, and both numbers in academics are looked at. Some say 200, some say 160. There were 52 that were brought to trial, and 30 were actually found guilty of witchcraft itself. Of those, 25 people died during the hysteria itself. 19 were hanged at Proctor's Ledge, only recently rediscovered by the fine work of people like Marilyn Roach and Emerson Baker and others that re-examined the work of Sidney Purley. And at the end of the lecture, you'll see a fitting monument that was put there at Proctor's Ledge to remember the unfortunate victims. Giles Corey was pressed to death under weight, and 5 actually died in jail, including an infant, Sarah Good. The executed names here I want to read out of respect. I think that we look at the Salem witchcraft trials and meld it into the season of Halloween very much, but these poor unfortunates were accused. They weren't practicing witches. They probably were very well church-going individuals, well respected in their community. My own ancestor, Mary Perkins Bradbury, had a petition that was actually sent by the people of her town to stay her execution, but she was still jailed and sentenced to be executed before she escaped. The names that I'd like to remember today include Bridget Bishop, Martha Carrier, Giles Corey, Martha Corey, the Reverend George Burroughs, Mary Estey, Sarah Good, Elizabeth Howe, George Jacob Sr., Susanna Martin, Rebecca Nurse, Mary Parker, Alice Parker, John Proctor, Ann Pudater, Wilmot Reed, Margaret Scott, Sarah Wilds, John Willard, and Samuel Wardwell Sr. If we could just pause for a moment to remember them and to just recall that these unfortunates could have also been your ancestor, and perhaps one of them are, and how possible your own ancestor who escaped being accused could have easily had the finger pointed at them. Thank you. Locating an accused ancestor. Well, just like any process in genealogy, when it may be you're trying to find a Mayflower ancestor or someone who fought in the Revolutionary War, you review your ancestors that you already know for looking for clues. So primarily what we would suggest in this case is reviewing your family tree for ancestors that were living in New England between 1692 and 93. An accused could be as young as a child, as infirm as a very elderly person. There was no age range, particular, unlike military, where you would be looking for someone who was able-bodied to march off to, say, Lexington and Concord. You want to compare the location of your ancestors with those who are accused of witchcraft. So knowing where your ancestor lived is going to help to find out if that is sort of the region that is being concerned. So if your ancestor lived down in Rhode Island, chances are they're not going to have much involvement in Massachusetts affairs, specifically those who are being accused up and around Essex County. You also want to compare a listing of those that were executed and accused of witchcraft against your own genealogy, and I'll explain how you can find that material right online. Here's an example of my own family tree where my 10th great grandmother, Mary Perkins, wife of Captain Thomas Bradbury, is someone that I could earmark as someone to investigate. Now, obviously, I know that she was someone who was accused of witchcraft, but that's sort of the time frame you will be looking at. So anybody that is in the realm of my ancestors, Caleb Moody, Benjamin Morris, or any of the people that were alive in the era of 1692, 93 could be possible candidates. So as you're looking for your ancestors that were alive then you want to run it against those that were accused and executed. Keeping in mind that not everyone who lived in Salem village, now the town of Danvers, were the main players in the witchcraft trials. These are just a small portion of the local inhabitants, as you will see in a moment, extended further out into Essex County. The accused, and this is not all complete, but these are the various places in Essex County and abroad. So Salem, which would be the current town of Salem. Salem Village is Danvers, as I previously said. Amesbury, Andover, Beverly, Boxford, Gloucester, Haverhill, Ipswich, Lynn, Manchester, Marblehead, Rowley, Salisbury, and Topsfield are some of the towns where accused and those executed were actually from. Now, keeping in mind that not all of them are from Salem or even Essex County, when you're looking at your genealogy, is an important thing to consider because your ancestors could have lived on the fringes of near Massachusetts. For instance, some of the counties outside of Essex County included Middlesex and Suffolk County, towns such as Billerica, Boston, Charlestown, Malden, Reading, and even into the District of Maine, which is now, of course, the state of Maine, but the town of Wells, and Massachusetts, the town of Woburn. These are just some of the towns that had people that were accused of witchcraft and were brought to trial. Let's talk about an overview of resources in general. I'd like to start by talking about our own website, AmericanAncestors.org, which I'm very proud of because of the amount of scholarship that's available for researching people of the 17th century, and in this case, specifically those involved in the Salem witchcraft trials. We'll touch base on a few things. The Massachusetts vital records, 1620 to 1850, the Massachusetts probate files, the Essex genealogist, Essex antiquarian, and lastly, our own publication, the New England Historical and Genealogical Register, to talk about sources that you can find if you're a member of American Ancestors or interested in becoming one. The Tan books, or the pre-1850 official series, were a series of hundreds of books that were created at the turn of the 19th into the 20th century for vital records. Some of them were published before 1900 and had a variety of different scope, either verbatim or alphabetized transcriptions. But the Tan books themselves started around the early 1900s and were still published until recent years for a variety of the communities. You can search all of the published volumes that are published by NEHDS or out of copyright on American Ancestors. And that includes records that would related to those accused at Salem. So, of course, a name that is fresh on many people's minds, it's Giles Corey, the unfortunate gentleman who was crushed to death, not hanged during the witchcraft trial. So I'm just going to do a basic search on Giles Corey under our database. I plugged simply in his name, his last name. I could put in years if I wanted to, the type of event, and then I would hit search. And once I hit search, I'm going to get a capsulized view from that pre-1850 vital record series, and you can actually zoom in further on it. But this case is a marriage between Giles Corey and Mary Bright on the 11th of April, 1664, which is available from Salem Vital Records, Volume 3, page 245, and this came from the Essex County Quarterly Court Records. The quarterly courts in the 17th century would often record both marriages and occasionally births. So here is the entry right here from American Ancestors, and where we can zoom right in and see this entry for Giles Corey. You are able to also to download this to your computer. You can print it off, or if you wanted to read page by page through, you have the availability of going through it right there. And of course, with this square button here, you can magnify it to the full screen of your page and plus or minus to zoom in and zoom out. Massachusetts probate records of the 17th through most of the 19th century for many of the counties in Massachusetts are available on AmericanAncestors.org. And this includes Essex County. One of the databases that we have includes Essex County file papers from 1638 to 1881. Giving you just a quick example of a search, I decided to search for a Joseph Glover from Salem, Massachusetts in the 17th century. And this document was able to appear on my screen. It gives me a summary that is 6 pages long, that it is the probate case 11037, and that this is actually just the envelope for it. I can actually then go into the record itself, and like the Massachusetts vital records we just looked at, you have the availability of zooming in, zooming out, making it full screen, downloading, and printing that document. And as you can see, the 17th century document is right there in front of your eyes, very high quality scan. And this may relate to when you're doing research into the accused. I mean, remember, not all accused were executed, so you may find a probate record for them some years later. And you may find a record of their own parents, individual family. Using the fan approach of family, associates, and neighbors may help tell the full story of your ancestor that was involved in the witchcraft trials. The Essex Genealogist is a publication by the Essex Society of Genealogists, and the Essex Genealogist is available also on American Ancestors. Going back to Giles Corey again, I just decided to do a search on the issue for him there. And when I did, I found that there were many instances, in fact, 445 instances of Giles Corey. So by simply clicking on the name with the camera icon, I can then find the actual article that I'm curious about. Again, zooming in, zooming out, full page, and downloading and printing is the availability I have. And of course, going page by page through it is wonderful, of course, when you're looking at an article, because you want to read the whole thing. The landing page might not specifically be on page one. It's where the instance where the name occurs. The Essex Antiquarian is another journal. This has been long out of print, and this was done by Sidney Purley, the esteemed historian from Salem, who was very interested in the Salem witchcraft trials. So this publication is also available on American Ancestors. So this time we're going to do a search on the accused and executed Rebecca Nurse. Rebecca Nurse, whose homestead still survives, is one of the key people and appears recently in a new published volume about her story. As you can see here, there are 896 references to Rebecca Nurse, and we're just going to choose the first one here again by clicking simply on View Image. And again, I get a capsulized version to find out this is in the Essex Antiquarian, Volume 4, page 135 from 1900. And there's an article here about her home written by Elizabeth Porter Gould back 122 years ago. The New England Historical and Genealogical Register, we are now in our anniversary year of 175 years. We've been publishing it quarterly continuously since 1847. I'm honored to be an author of some articles in the register, and many of the articles that have spanned the time from the 19th to the 21st century introduce scholarship of the highest level in American genealogy. I'm certain you will find many things in your genealogy, but for the purpose of today's lecture, let me introduce a search under George Burroughs, who was the Reverend George Burroughs, who was executed at Salem at Proctor's Ledge. Doing my search here simply by putting in his name, of course, you're now spanning a journal that has a variety of articles that could be a George Burroughs from the 1500s as much as George Burroughs from the 1900s. So keeping that in mind, the years here are not the years in which George lived. This is the years in which the publication would have occurred. So if you have a citation and you know a volume, you can actually go into volume and page here and pull up that if you had a citation referring to George. In this case, I'm just doing a blind search and not going to put anything more than that. With a little scrolling down, I did find an article in 1916 in volume 70, page 66, referring to sundry documents relating to witchcraft in Massachusetts, which mentioned George Burroughs. Doing a click from there, I can see again that capsulized view that I can download, zoom in, print, etc. from the register, or go page by page and read through. This document itself, where I've indicated in red, mentions George Burroughs for his incarceration 7 weeks from the 9th of May and the cost of 17 shillings 6 pence. And as you look on this list here, you'll see other people. Roger Toothaker, who is an unfortunate who died in prison after being accused. We also have people like Susanna Martin, who was also executed, George Jacobs, who was executed, Rebecca Nurse. So what we are looking at here is a transcription that was done in 1916 from original records from the Massachusetts Archive series. And I will talk to you about that and how you can view volume 135, which has many of the witchcraft documents from the comfort of your own home through Family Search. But this particular transcription appears in any HGS register in 1916 from volume 70. One of the things I would be amiss not to mention is our digital library and archive at American Ancestors. One of the documents we have actually is relating to the witchcraft trials. It's not a document from the courts, but it's actually a letter from Cotton Mather in 1692 to Stephen Sewell that mentions the trials. And this is one of our precious documents. We have so many in our archives, that would shed light onto your ancestry. I hope you become a member, or if you are a member, find out what tremendous materials we have for scholarship that may aid you in your search, may it be on the witchcraft trials or on any topic of American genealogy. Here's another view of that actual letter written in 1692 by Cotton Mather, who was an outspoken person during the witchcraft trials, which you, I'm sure, have heard of. Let's talk now about the Massachusetts State Archives collection. I had the honor to work there 35 years ago, and one of the most popular collections to historians were the microfilm and the original volumes of the Massachusetts Archives collection, over 300 volumes of scrapbooks that exist, put together in the 19th century, that cover 1629 to 1799. Within these 328 volumes, you will find a variety of petitions and letters, letters to the governor, things on piracy, things on the Revolutionary War, the King Philip's War, and of course, for this case, on the Salem witchcraft trials. And the nice thing about this collection, it's completely indexed. The card index for the Massachusetts Archives, which is available on Family Search, will allow you to get to the cards for each one of the volumes. And even that would include the Salem witchcraft trial. So when I do a search on the cards itself, they don't jump alphabetically. So there's no search that says, give me a reference to Mary Bradbury. I have to browse through it. And of course, there could be a Mary Bradbury ranging from 1629 to 1799 that may not be the person accused of witchcraft in my family tree. But if I do a search, after a certain amount of time, I do find a reference to Mary Bradbury from September 1692 in the actual manuscript history of Massachusetts written by Governor Thomas Hutchinson. And this refers back to his notes for his book. So in this case, they didn't have a specific document that I was looking for, but have no fear, with all the accused, there were many documents to search. The Massachusetts State Archives collection itself has another set. So the indexes are 57 reels that have been digitized on FamilySearch.org. This collection is 181 reels of microfilm. Now, what we do here is we would simply go down and scroll for the actual volumes, but I'm going to cut to the chase and let you know that volume 135 is the collection that covers witchcraft documents from 1656 through 1759. Now, you may ask, the witchcraft trials in Massachusetts occurred 1692-93. There are earlier witchcraft accusations, as we saw the things with Ann Hibbins, the children that were accusing in 1688, and of course, there's records into the 18th century. Primarily, one of the things you want to look for, if your ancestor was accused or executed, there are documents for compensation for the pain and suffering and loss of family members that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts awarded to families early part of the 18th century, when the wrongdoings of the 1690s were repaid. No cost could repay the loss of a family member, but the financial compensation is mentioned. And this may mention family members such as children receiving a portion after their parent had died. The witchcraft volume in volume 135, again, searching through image by image. Now, the nice thing about this, at the beginning of the volume itself, you should have probably a volume and page reference from the index card, but at the beginning there is a table of contents, which actually gives you the page and the document number and the date of the document on the right-hand side. So this gives you a variety of different documents here, such as the indictment of Margaret Jacobs of Salem for witchcraft practice upon Elizabeth Hubbard of Salem, Mass. Here's the actual document itself with the citation. And again, this comes from microfilm that has been digitized. So these are not in color per se, but are available at the Massachusetts State Archives. And they do, under some circumstances, reproduce in color certain documents. So if you find that, you can inquire of the cost to get something a little bit nicer. So here's the actual document that was pasted into a scrapbook over 125 years ago. These documents are now been removed from the acidic wood pulp scrapbooks and put into acid-free folders. So these are so much easier to use now that they're digitized and cleaned up a little bit. And so perhaps this would be a document that interests you, but know that there are thousands upon thousands of documents relating to the witchcraft trials. This is just one collection. The other thing that you'll find in the index itself of that volume are all the index of names besides the table of contents. So you can actually go and find the pagination of people that are accused of witchcraft. And in this case, you can see the ones that have asterisks are being flagged for that same purpose. Another example of a document in this case is for someone receiving the benefit for their ancestor, in this case their parent, who had been accused of witchcraft. This is actually my ancestor, Mary Perkins Bradbury's daughter, Mary Bradbury, and her husband, Henry Treat, collecting the payment for their mother's suffering in jail. Salem Witch Trial Documentary Archive and Transcription Project and the University of Virginia. This website, which is one of my favorite websites to use for any of colonial America, is brought to you by the University of Virginia. They have a variety of topics, and I wish I could go through all of them in the course of today, but I would like to highlight a few things that would find useful in your research to try to verify an accused witch, or to find something that may help you better understand your ancestors' role in the witchcraft trials. Now, the first thing I'm going to examine are the court records itself. They have gone through the process of digitizing and collecting transcriptions and original records during the trials. One of those such items is the Salem Witchcraft Papers, the 3-volume set that was put together back in the 1970s. As a wonderful transcription of the court records, but they have echoed it with an actual image of the document, and as I will show you, as well as other court records. As you can see, the Essex Quarterly Court is also here. So if I do a look here, I can actually go right down person by person, how it was arranged in the book by the person who is accused, and I can select that person, in this case, Mary Bradbury. And again, this book by Paul Boyer and Stephen Nissenbaum from New York is a must-have if you're a scholar in the Salem witchcraft trials, to have these right in your fingertips. But again, it is digitized as well. So if I go down here and scroll to a variety of different people, I can find Giles Corey document from September 16th, 1692. And then here is a warrant for the apprehension of Giles Corey, Mary Warren, Abigail Hobbs, Bridget Bishop, with summons for witnesses versus Giles Corey and others. And the document is there on the right. Once I click on it, I can actually access the original document and zoom right in on it. So you're not getting just the transcription, but you're actually seeing the original as well in many cases. Original court records are also available from a variety of other repositories, the Boston Public Library, the Maine Historical Society in Portland, the Massachusetts State Archives, that we've talked about earlier, the Massachusetts Historical Society, the Peabody Essex Museum, the Essex County Court Archives, and the Essex Institute Archives. Going into these type of collections, I can actually select a particular document that may relate to not just the accused, but the accuser, as we have up here, Ann Putnam Jr. versus Sarah Good, who was executed for witchcraft. I can click on the actual document, and as you can see, these color documents are very high quality, and I can read for the previous image and go right to the next image as we go through the collection. Another database within this wonderful website are the selection of notable people. This would include judges, accusers, as well as the accused and executed. If I go into this item right here, I can find out about Bridget Bishop. I can see images which are contemporary. In fact, one of the images is a reenactor who portrayed her in Cry Witch in Salem a number of years ago. I can get a full essay about her actual life. I can get a courtroom examination transcription, and I can also see the records. This transcription, written by Sarah Nell Walsh, talks about Bridget Bishop herself and the trial and describes in detail what was going on in the courtroom when Bridget Bishop took the stand. The cases related to Bridget Bishop, again, you can see the originals. So we can see here the different documents. The one that was about Giles Corey that we saw first also echoes Bridget Bishop in it as well. You can find the actual document number, and once you click on it, you're again going to be given the option to see the front and back of the document scanned, as well as a verbatim transcription from the work of Boyer and Nissenbaum that was done in 1977. So you're not second guessing what the document looks like. You're going to see that as well as the transcription, which I think is a brilliant way to discover scholarship on this topic. My own ancestor's brother, Judge Samuel Sewell, was the only judge repentant for his role in the witchcraft trials, as his diaries were reprinted, and you'll find in the bibliography, if you choose to obtain it from our store. I have listed a number of volumes that are important to your understanding of the witchcraft trials in Salem. Samuel Sewell's diary is definitely one of the ones that's a must-have to look through. As you can see here, Monday, September 19, 1692, about noon at Salem, Giles Corey was pressed to death for standing mute, as much pains were used with him 2 days, one after another, by the court by Captain Gardner of Nantucket, who had been his acquaintance, but all in vain. On September 20th, now I hear from Salem that about 18 years ago, he was suspected to have stamped and pressed a man to death, but was cleared. 'Twas not remembered till Alice Putnam had told of it in Corey's Spectre of the Sabbath day night before the execution. The late David L. Green, the editor of the American Genealogist, started in their 1980s to do the genealogy, immediate family, and some of the background on some of the executed Salem witches. This article here on George Jacobs is just one of a few articles that he wrote, and again are in my bibliography, to what you will find as beneficial to investigate Salem witchcraft trial victims and executed. And these articles, incidentally, you can find on American Ancestors, as the American Genealogist is digitized on our website. An interesting website is the 17th century.us primary sources, where they investigate a variety of different things, going document by the accused, talking about the complaint of arrest, the examination, whether or not they were imprisoned. Did the evidence get entered into the records? Was there a grand jury or an indictment? Was there an actual jury trial itself? Were they convicted, executed, or was there any restitution for their role? So this document is just one of another website that has taken the time to investigate document by document into the witchcraft trials. And I found it very interesting when I searched on my own ancestor, Mary Perkins Bradbury, to see the breakdown per document of all the different categories that were actually assigned to the documents. So I found this very fascinating. And again, it's in my handout under websites that you can examine. I mentioned earlier that we were going to discuss a couple published biographies. One of them is a typescript that we have at NEHGS. It's the work of Marjorie Wardwell Otten called The Witch Hunt of 1692, A Tragedy in Massachusetts, where she's taken each one of the individuals. This one we have Rebecca Nurse, with the date of her baptism in Yarmouth, Norfolk, England, her marriage to Francis Nurse, and all of the timeline of what is going on with her conviction all the way to her execution. And what this author has done is to add all details to the story. So this book is very much well used at NEHGS. We do have a copy in the library in case you would like to use that in your research. And I also would like to mention the fine work of the Associated Daughters of Early American Witches. This is the Roll of Ancestors compiled by Dr. Kim Ormsby Nagy, who is their past president, past Register General a number of years ago. And this goes into the same sort of examination. It also mentions children, the spouses, or if they were single. Different references and footnotes are included. So a quick way of not just looking at the executed, but all of those that were associated having been accused for witchcraft. We're going to mention hereditary societies for a bit now. And the first one who I just mentioned was the Associated Daughters of Early American Witches. They are now 35 years old. The Associated Daughters of Early American Witches is an organization dedicated to preserving and honoring our ancestors who were accused of witchcraft in colonial America prior to December 31st, 1699. So this is not just Salem, folks. This is those who were accused and executed in Connecticut back in the 1650s, the ones who were early in Massachusetts, or anywhere in America prior to December 31st, 1699. Each year during our annual breakfast meeting, the members introduce themselves and state who their accused ancestor was, sometimes find new cousins at the same breakfast. So any ladies are interested and have someone that falls into this criteria, you may want to investigate further. Their website is www.adeaw.us. Again, is in my syllabus. And their website is very well done and has a variety of things describing the qualifications and the particular ancestors that you could qualify under. So on their website, if clicking under the same link for ancestors, we can find out all of the qualifying ancestors and their spouses. And as you can see, they are from other states outside of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Virginia, and so forth and so on, also in the gentlemen, including the maiden names of their spouses. So I think you'll find this interesting to use. This is a quick way of running your ancestors that you examined alive between 1692 and 93, but now looking at the entire 17th century to see if you have somebody in another state that may have befell an accusation or an execution for the crime of witchcraft. Tips from the American Daughters of Early American Witches website. And these are right from their website. So these are italicized because this is their direct quotes. Proof of accusation, conviction, etc. What they prefer is reference of the court record with the proper source citations. Now, you may find a listing from their website, but if you have the reference to their court case, in this case, Essex County Court Archives, Salem Witchcraft Volume 1, number 309 is the document. So this is anchoring the proof, if you will, of their association with being brought to court. When they speak of vital records, they ask you to provide proof, vital records, census, Bible record, obituary, tombstone picture, etc., for each stated date and place of birth, marriage, and death in your application. If you only have proof of a year of the event, only use that. And if you only have the county or the state for an event, only use that. So this breakdown is also on their website, but I thought I'd give you an idea of the detail that you need to go to when you're filling out your application. Now, some people tend to use Find a Grave a lot now. What they advise is when using Find a Grave photo as your proof, please include the memorial number and the name and location of the cemetery. If there is no legible photo, these memorials are not acceptable for proof unless citations are provided for the information. Like example, a transcription of the headstone information or burial record from a church or a cemetery. The original documents. If the document, Bible record, headstone image, etc., that you are sending as proof is difficult to read, please provide a transcription of the pertinent information and or an enlargement. Primary source. Only use a family genealogy or town history when a vital record, church record, probate record, headstone image, etc. is not available. Whenever possible, use a primary source. This is rules to live by, folks, for any time you're applying for a hereditary organization or lineage society. Remember to underline in red all pertinent genealogical information. Also write the generation number on each proof document, and this helps them speed up the review process and ensure the review does not miss a key date, place, or name when they're going through your application. Now, do you already have a relative in the ADEAW? If you have a member of your family who's already a member, you may be using their application as your proof for a common generation. You should state their actual member number, then the appropriate, then the details such as the dates matching with the original application with a correction made by the Registrar General. The application must be completed for each generation. Now, for you gentlemen out there, there is also another organization, Son of a Witch, that was founded in 1975 and revised interest in 2012. Currently, they do not have a website, but they do have a Facebook page, which you can be invited to join once you're a member. Their application is pretty straightforward here. Name of for my certificate, my address. I hereby apply for membership from who was on N1. So this is mentioning the lineal descent. You sign the application, and if their genealogist general approves it, the cost is $300. Currently, it is by invitation only, and I do know that with a good Google search, you can find their organization and contact. And if you have any difficulty, feel free to reach out to me at American Ancestors, and I'll be more than happy to put you in touch with the organization. You know, there's always genealogical gifts that one enjoy. And I recently was given the packet of information on Mary Perkins Bradbury, which had some great documents in it, but it also had a survey from the Salem Witch Museum from the point of view of a descendant, asking information about particular descendant who now owned the packet, and I sent that information and I was very delighted. And these packets range in price from $10 to $15, but are a nice educational piece for yourself or maybe for a budding genealogist in your family tree that you'd like to have them know more about a particular person. And they have currently 20 packets for all 20 executed victims, and there's some new ones there for Mary Bradbury, Abigail Faulkner, Sarah Osborne, and documents on the Putnam family as well. 2 volumes that we sell on American Ancestors. You can find in our bookstore. Again, I had mentioned my friend and colleague, D. Brenton Simons, our president of American Ancestors by the New England Historical Genealogical Society. Witches, Rakes, and Rogues is a true story of scams, scandal, murder, and mayhem in Boston between 1630 and 1775. It's a wonderful read, well-researched, and a great piece of scholarship on the infamous individuals of Boston. We have also reprinted, which has a foreword from our president, D. Brenton Simons as well, The Annals of Witchcraft in New England. This is a comprehensive study done in the 19th century by the historian Samuel G. Drake. Again, wonderful volumes to have if you have an interest in the Salem witchcraft trials or in witchcraft in general in New England. There are probably no fitting words other than the forgiveness that Samuel Sewall asked years after the trials that fit what should have been done long before by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. By the early 18th century, the financial compensation was starting to be given forward for the accused and the executed. You will find in Salem and in Danvers memorials such as these granite benches that are erected in Salem for the hanged witches. To also this monument in Danvers to those innocents who died during the hysteria. And lastly, the recent monument at Proctor's Ledge, where the site just above this wall was the ledge in which those hanged at Salem during the witchcraft trials occurred. There's probably the best fitting memorial, in my estimate, is to be a descendant and to remember them, to research your ancestor and breathe life back into their story and educate the next generation is truly the most wonderful memorial you can give for your ancestor who suffered during this time. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie and we'll address any questions you might have.
Thank you, David, and thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I know everybody has been very captured by the amount of detail and resources that you highlighted. We did get quite a number of questions that were coming through the panel. So just as a reminder, if you haven't already, please type your question to the Q&A panel and we'll get to as many of them as we can. First question we have is there any master list of those that were accused?
Yes, actually, the variety of the different publications. I mentioned about the two published sort of biography that have the accused and the executed. The one by Dr. Nagy by the Associated Daughters of Early American Witches has not just the executed, but those accused. There also are documents such as on the website for the University of Virginia. You'll find people that are accused, and of course, again, not all of them are executed, so you can peruse through those documents as well, because Boyer and Nissenbaum book, which is in their verbatim, includes all of those individuals.
Okay, great. Thank you, Carmen. Another question we had was from Janice, and she wanted to ask, did members and friends of the families of the accused or executed tend to leave the area and maybe go to other colonies?
Well, if the person was accused and then cleared, I find that they tended to not move very far. But if your ancestor was executed, I give you a case in point. Mary Town Esty of Essex County, her son Jacob would move clear out of Essex County down to Suffolk County to what was the South Precinct of Dorchester. And before he died in the early 1730s, the town that he was named, that he moved to, was named in honor of the man who is the judge, Chief Justice William Stoughton, who had executed his, gave the order to have his mother executed. So there's some sad twists of fate there. Some of them did move far away. In fact, there are accusers, for that matter, that disappear from the face of history. They just fall out. And some of the girls, we don't know what happened to them. They were accusing. Then there are other family members that just stay in the same area, still in Essex County and the surrounding counties today. If you really stop and think, we have not addressed this. If you look at that, there are approximately 35 million potential descendants from the 51 that survived the Mayflower in the first winter. If you take into an estimate of 200 accused from just 70 odd years after the Mayflower, how many millions of descendants there are for those accused of witchcraft, for that matter, even for those that were accusing those of witchcraft. So you may find that they fall in your family tree, all three: accused, judge, and accuser.
Great. Thank you, David. Another question we had was regarding giving some advice to someone that's tracking down a resident that was living in Billerica, Massachusetts, who had actually died in prison in 1692. There was a history in 19th century that did say she was in prison, but there was nothing definitive found. Could there be any other reasons why she would have been imprisoned and why they might have ascribed, witchcraft for her?
I mean, she could have been, I guess the better part of the question is to drop me a line with her name and I can run it against contemporary sources for you. So feel free to reach out to me there. Somebody in the 19th century may have misread something, there may have been a list of people incarcerated at that point in time. I mean, if it didn't spell out witchcraft, maybe she was grouped together, those that were imprisoned. The time frame is definitely, of course, very possible for someone to be in witchcraft trials, but of course there were other crimes as well, adultery, stealing, whatever the case might be. So she may be misrepresented there, but I'd be curious to see if I could help you. So feel free to reach out to me.
Okay, great. And I'm seeing several questions in our Q&A panel that were asking about, does it seem that there was more of a likelihood of accusing women during this time, and that about why women were mostly the ones accused and why very few men?
Well, I mean, from what I've seen, and obviously the statistics show it, that the majority of them are women more than men. Many of these ladies were widows, and some of them were single women. So the idea that you're not going to be able to defend your actions with your husband with you. I mean, giving a case in point, sometimes you would have the husband try to defend his own wife in court, and then all of a sudden spectral evidence occurs, and now they're pointing the finger at him too, and he's equally as guilty and potentially could have been executed. So spouses of both sex, this could have affected. But it does seem to be the females are being accused far more than the men, by and large. So my colleague Marilyn Roach, Emerson Baker, or even Stacy Schiff have probably touched base this in some greater detail than what I could on the course of today, but I would say that their scholarship is probably a good thing to turn to.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. And I think we have time for just maybe one or two more questions here. When did the remuneration for the descendants of persons executed as witches end?
Well, I know that it was going on in the 1700s into the 17 teens. I know that the document for Henry True and his wife Mary Bradbury True for my ancestors, that document's dated 1710. I don't think it went very far into beyond that. Those records are again in part of the Massachusetts Archives collection series, and you'll also find many of them mentioned and scanned on the University of Virginia's website. So if there's a document for that compensation that was paid out, you should find it there. But it wasn't going into, say, the late 1700s or the 1800s for the great grandchildren, by all means. No, it's primarily the 1700s and the 17 teens from what I've seen.
Okay, great. And we're going to take one more question. Pamela had said that she found that many of her accused ancestors were Quakers, and was that prevalent as well to maybe use them as a scapegoat?
Well, the Quakers, unfortunately, were a scapegoat for execution from the time of, the 1650s to 1660s. I mean, what went on in Boston with the persecution of the Quakers, I wouldn't say is simply as criminal, but it could be as a very close comparison of the crime. I mean, they're practicing actually religion, not practicing witchcraft, but in the eyes of the Puritans in Massachusetts, you might as well have been committing the same sin. I would say that if you look at the people from Salem Village, these are the same people that are going to church with the accusers. I mean, these are your neighbors. These are the people that are attending church with you, or had for maybe 2 or more generations attended church with your family. It was really a hysteria that really got caught up, and my personal feeling is that they got caught up into this whole thing, and it just didn't stop. And just they were pointing the finger at practically everyone. They were running out of names of people they know, and they were calling for these accused to pick more names. So if they were pointing the finger at Quakers, obviously there's some element of that because of the fact that they were already being persecuted in general. So if you look at history with the eye of who are already being examined as a threat, or it's criminal to pursue your religion, by all means, it probably gave you even a greater chance of being accused of witchcraft.
Okay, great. Thank you, David, so much for that presentation and answering so many questions. If we didn't get to your question, please write to us at education@nehds.org or to our instructor, David Allen Lambert. You'll find his email online, and if you also can reach out to education@nehds.org if you need to get his contact information. If you're interested in having us do research on your behalf, contact research@nehds.org. And if you have more general reference questions about any area of your family history, including the witchcraft trials, you can chat with our genealogist for free Tuesday through Saturday, 9 to 5 p.m. Eastern, with extended hours on Wednesdays, 9 to 8 p.m. You just go to americanancestors.org/chat. This service is free and open to the public. We have the following upcoming events on americanancestors.org. Including Magnificence, Marriage and Murder, the story of Scotland's Brodick Castle on October 21st with Kurt DiCamillo. This is a free event. We also have the Genevieve Weiner annual lecture, A Festival of Freedom, which is going to be exploring the story of Passover on October 25th. And we have a course on demand for just a few more days left. If you're interested in researching any loyalist ancestors, it's still available for purchase until October 30th. And our next course that's coming up in November is Finding Origins, Cluster Research and Practice. So don't miss out on these exciting events, and you can learn more at americanancestors.org/events to find out more. You will find a recording of this class on our website at americanancestors.org/watch by tomorrow. Thank you again for joining us for our webinar, Verifying Descent from Salem's Accused Witches. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center, americanancestors.org. We look forward to seeing you online. Goodbye for now.